officer for MOQdigital, and I'll be providing an overview of the context about why modernisation is key to helping organisations think about a modern data estate and a modern IT landscape that enables organisations to be able to achieve more with less. So for those that don't know MOQdigital is 100% focused on the Microsoft estate. We work with organisations across a number of different industry verticals, ranging from state and local government through financial services and education, as well as a number of other customers as well. We have deep specialist expertise and competencies across the Microsoft estate, and that's demonstrated by the 15 gold competencies that we have as an organisation, as well as the 4 advanced specialisations that we've been recognised for, which is the top echelon from recognition of our deep technical skills and experience. And as a business, we're actually truly a nationally focused business as well. Our head office is in Brisbane, but we've got offices also Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, and also now in Perth with the recent acquisition of Dinks Consulting. Across our business, we then have 3 key core pillars that we help organisations then really truly transform their IT investments. And really these are the pillars that underpin the digital transformation that we're helping organisations accelerate. And that's through cybersecurity, foundational services, as well as digital services. But when we think about the integration platform that organisations are using, one of the key things about that is the connectedness that it starts to provide. How do we connect people, technology and processes? And organisations' IT landscapes are continuing to get more and more complex. Traditionally, we would focus on how do we go and reduce that IT complexity by reducing the number of vendors, by reducing the number of systems that we're utilising. But what started to happen is we're actually increasing that complexity, moving away from one central system or moving away just from an ERP to do everything into then specialist line of business systems that are really best of breed. And as we start to expand that landscape, the complexity increases further as we have systems that are on premise, we've got systems that are in a partner cloud, and then we've got SaaS applications as well. But it's also that interconnectedness that's required not only with the organisation themselves, but also the ability to easily then integrate with organisations and other processes that are external to the firewall as well. So the scenario that I often describe is if you think about a modern e-commerce scenario, you've got an e-commerce website, maybe it's running Magento as the CMS and doing all of the e-commerce processing to be able to sell those products to customers. We then are running a warehouse management system that controls the dispatching and making sure that those goods get in the hands of people that have ordered them. And then we've got a CRM system that then has a record of all of those transactions and enables us to have a single view of customer. But in order for that to work, we need to make sure that all of those systems are talking together so that then when the e-commerce record happens and the transactions purchased, that's shipped across the warehouse management system and then into CRM. And all of those pieces need to be able to happen in real time in order to be able to enable organisations to meet the ongoing requirements and the speed of business today. And when we think about the modern integration platform, it's really designed to help some of the challenges that organisations have had with legacy systems such as Biztalk. Biztalk has been that workhorse inside of organisations for almost 20 years in order to be able to create connectors and interfaces across a number of different systems. But there's a need to increase the cadence of development as business continues to accelerate their needs, but also the demands that they have on IT systems. And those are really underpinned by how do we go and increase the performance of the platform, ensuring that it's right sized and right fit, but also how do we reduce costs there, because we really don't want to have the upfront CapEx cost. We really want to be able to scale as demand increases, especially with the hockey stick curve that many organisations are experiencing as they continue to grow and disrupt the market with innovation. The other key thing is we can't talk about any IT system today without talking about risk and compliance, and specifically around cybersecurity. So ensuring a platform that's robust and has all of the mechanisms in place to ensure that it's not only scalable, but also is then protected from the ongoing different threat actors that are looking to try and extract value and disrupt organisations. And that downtime and the availability is key. Being able to achieve 6 nines of availability is a common requirement for organisations today. Being able to then deliver and achieve that, because having windows of downtime between 2 and 4 a.m. is no longer an opportunity for us, especially in a post-pandemic world where no matter what business you're in, you truly are now operating 24/7. And we'll talk about digital transformation, because digital transformation is often seen as a buzzword, but really that's the underpinning of any integration platform. An integration platform is designed to take existing business processes and help automate and streamline those. And that's really at the heart of everything that digital transformation is about. And speeding up the way that we interface and make quicker decisions so that we've got timely information and can make sure that we've got all of the information at hand to then move at the speed that business needs to today. But when we think about optimization, because organisations are constantly being asked to do more with less, how do we take the existing IT budget and continue to deliver more and more innovation directly from that? Organisations are thinking about how they actually move from the traditional operating models to how they can start to focus on moving the needle forward. How do we use IT as a key enabler for the business and not just a function that's designed to keep the lights on? IT has been put under more and more pressure to do that, and often one of the inhibiting factors, and I almost describe this sometimes, it's like trying to run a marathon with a boat anchor tied behind you, because it's slowing you down and not enabling you to be able to achieve the maximum performance, and that's legacy application, so that long tail. And integration is often built up on decades upon decades of development and process. And it often becomes very difficult when you're faced with the challenge of how do I start to modernise this platform, and how do I then go and move that workload? And what we're going to do in today's webinar is unpack some of the solutions that you've got and also some of the options you've got in place to help with that modernisation of your integration platform. But underpinning that is how do we free up those IT resources to truly drive transformation? It's often said that 80% of an organisation's IT budget is focused just around operations. As there's more competitive pressure in the landscape, whether that's from new market entrants that are disrupting the way that business is done, those born in the cloud organisations that don't have that technical debt, all of their IT investments can be focused on driving innovation rather than trying to then support existing platforms. It's really then becoming how do we unleash those resources to be able to then be truly aligned to the objectives of the business. And that really then starts to let us think about, well, let's look at our existing integration platforms and understand what we can then do in order to be able to free those finite resources up, but increase the cadence of development to meet the needs of the organisation. And for those that have seen me present before, you'll often see me talking about this digital transformation and how it really becomes symbiotic in enabling that interface. And never more so when we start to talk about integration, because that's truly that interconnected piece between our customers, our products, our operations, and all of the employees in the business. Without integration, we're not able to then go and achieve this symbiotic relationship that needs to happen. You'll hear about Jim Collins talking about the concept of a flywheel, that a change in one part of the business has an impact on another part of the business, and it continues to actually increase the speed of the flywheel. So often it takes a long and a lot of effort to get the flywheel turning, but once it starts to turn, it then turns at a rapid speed inside of an engine. And digital transformation is a lot like that. You can go and make those investments in each of those key core areas, and the wheel starts to spin slowly. You add another revolution onto that, and it continues to do that. And really, an integration platform is designed to help you be able to achieve that innovation, but also be fit for purpose to allow you to grow. Whether that growth is organic growth, whether that growth is through acquisition, it's how do we ensure that that platform can then rapidly scale with those emerging needs. So there's been a number of recent studies that have been done of late to then really think about organisations and compare good versus great. And one of the things that comes through in any of those studies is that organisations that are embracing the cloud are growing significantly faster. And that's really about them being more efficient with the resources, but also having increased agility that cloud platforms then start to provide. And that's exactly the same in the integration space as well, is that 80% of organizations that are adopting that cloud first strategy are really starting to be able to take that speed and being able to deliver directly on that promise. If you look at a modern integration platform with logic apps and functions and all of the capability that provides, all of that capability is available out of the box, which increases the speed that being able to deliver rather than thinking about the traditional connector style model that we had inside of Biztalk. But what it also means is that we're able to then increase the orchestration capability to then think about introducing low-code platforms over the top of that. So bringing Power Platform and starting to then enable all of the makers and citizen developers in the organisation to be able to then streamline operations. It's about how do we go and take the power and put it in the hands of the subject matter experts that understand those business domains better than everyone in the organisation, but also enabling them to identify opportunities and be able to fail fast. So be able to then pivot, try something, introduce a new business process, and have a mechanism that then underpins and helps support that, but having those guardrails and governance in place that provides them the freedom and flexibility to digitise processes, but making that sure that there's enough controls around that. And that's where a modern integration platform really starts to come to the fore in enabling that rich orchestration. So what we're seeing further to that study is that organisations that are really starting to seize that transformation. When you think about transformation, you'll often think about sort of like your Airbnbs or your Ubers or the other disruptive organisations. But it's also then legacy businesses or traditional businesses that are then being forced to pivot, whether that's changes in financial services about having to know your customer and being able to personalise the experience, or being impacted by having to divest certain parts of the business because of different legislative rules, and the changes about I can't sell something to somebody that I'm on a call that's recently been introduced into Australia. All of those things are actually causing transformation in business, because business never stays still. It continues to move and evolve based on the requirements of the market, but also based on the needs of the individual business leaders. But what we're seeing is those organisations that are truly embracing that digital transformation are doubling their operating margin. They're enabling them to do more with less, so increasing the revenue per employee, so being able to then take that throughput and drive greater business value, but also having a direct impact on profitability by then having a higher net income directly on that. And what we'll walk through today is how you too can then start to embrace the changes that are happening and be able to then leverage a modern integration platform. Your legacy platform might be another middleware or another integration solution, or it might be Biztalk. So the transformation that we will walk you through is really to get you starting to think and understand what the value of iPaaS is inside of Azure. But when we think about modernising the integration environment, it's more than just simply moving to a new integration platform. It's really about how you can start to embrace those new capabilities, whether that's thinking about multi-cloud solutions or whether it's thinking about how do you then deliver the cloud on your terms. One of the things with a modern integration platform is not just the ability to run that in cloud, but also the ability for you to actually run that across hybrid clouds. So there's no lock-in for you. So for organisations that are wanting to make sure that they can actually then have portability of the solution, a modern integration solution allows you to then start to leverage the existing capability on premises as you're ready. And then when you start to transform and move that workload, you have the ability to then start to embrace that. Or should you want to move to another cloud provider, you have the ability to leverage containerization to truly have then the ability to have portability across that integration solution. So over to you, Chris, now to sort of give us an overview of the platform as a service and how organisations can truly take advantage of this.
Good morning, everyone. Apologise if I'm a little bit croaky. I've had my first shot today or yesterday, so struggling through that a little bit. They say it's good to start with a quote. So this is what Gartner defines an iPaaS platform is a suite of cloud services enabling development, execution, and governance of integration flows, and some other words to go along with it. But ultimately, it's about using the right tools for the right job to get that integration platform going. The next few slides, I'm going to talk through kind of what that modern integration platform is and why we should modernize, and then delve a little bit back towards Biztalk and then the migration options and the journey, and then I'll hand back over to Pete for the last couple of slides. So the modern integration platform in relation to the Azure cloud, there's a number of core services that that define what the platform is, and those two main things are logic apps and functions. From a Biztalk point of view, think of your logic apps as your orchestrations. Have a receive port and a couple of send ports, and may in Pete's example, like the warehousing solution, you may be sending messages to warehouses and finance systems, and that's very much like a drag and drop type surface. So for people coming from Biztalk, it's very comfortable. And on the other side of that, for things like stuff that's hard to do in Biztalk orchestrations, like complex mapping or writing code, that's when you can jump into Azure functions, which are discrete serverless bits of code that you can obviously do anything in, being native code, but it's great for defining rules, complex mapping, and maybe you're writing bespoke connections to on-premise systems that Logic Apps doesn't offer out of the box. Logic Apps is pretty awesome in that there's 200 plus connectors out there that connect to all your modern CRMs and services, Office 365, Salesforce, Dynamics CRM. Around those things, we've got the modern messaging services, which is your API management. So that's when you want to expose services, your APIs internally or externally out into the real world. It gives you that nice layer of here's a common portal that someone can sign up for that shows the API definitions, the security requirements, and any other things that you want to customize that portal with. And it gives you great security over the top, where we can rate limit calls and apply all your authorization authentication settings at that level. Around that, then we have Service Bus and Event Grid, which is really about your event-driven and your asynchronous messaging processes. Like for guaranteed delivery of messages, a consumer says, "Hey, I just want to give you this particular message," and we'll go away and process it. Kind of think of it in a way a little bit like the message box in Biztalk, but slightly different. The support services I think is really where the iPaaS platform shines. The CI/CD pipelines straight out of a DevOps, and now GitHub Actions means we can deploy things very quickly, and in reality, Biztalk to deploy integrations in an automated way has always been a little bit of a challenge. It's been possible, we've done it, but it's just not quite as nice as it could be. And we get all the nice native integration into application insights. That's when we can get our anomaly reporting and create alerts and just generally be very close to what's happening inside the platform. Around that, then you've also got storage services, and everybody wants AI and machine learning in their platforms and services. So given that we can use the components that we need, it's easy enough to bring those services in where and if required. So I guess the case for why modernize, and you've got probably a business view on it and a technical view on it. From a business view, the cost is going to be significantly less. You're only going to pay for what you use. Like we all know that as far as like a Biztalk licensing and infrastructure type arrangements is expensive out of the box. Just standing up the infrastructure and paying that per core license for Biztalk is pretty significant. And when you do that, if you're planning to migrate to say Biztalk 2020, or you need to understand your scale and potentially what your future scale is looking like. And this is where I think the iPaaS platform also comes into its own, is that you can scale it for what you need now and put in rule-based scaling to say, when the CPU or this many messages gets to this point, we can scale out our logic app to then be able to process more messages. Or now that we're having traffic in different, if you're a multinational company and you're having traffic in the UK, in Australia, you can still have a global endpoint through Azure Front Door, but it'll do geolocation to say, hey, I'm going to send all the UK traffic to a UK data center. So you've got the scale, but also the reduced latency of we're not, someone in the UK calling a service that's routing to a tin box in a server in Australia somewhere. And just less maintenance. Being in the cloud, the Azure cloud will handles all the patching and the underlying infrastructure, the benefits of serverless. More from a development and technical point of view, as I mentioned before, the CI/CD DevOps integration with Azure DevOps and GitHub is far better. It works natively out of the box, and there's not as many traps to Biztalk deployments. There's not as many traps in the iPaaS world as there is to deploying Biztalk. So it makes life simpler for deployment. And as Pete says, you're not having that 2 to 4 hours downtime in the middle of the night while you deploy 11T Biztalk apps. From a development point of view, I think Biztalk is a relatively niche skill set. I've worked on it for a number of years and realized that not everybody knows it. And the great thing about the iPaaS platform, it's very easy to pick up, especially from like a logic app's point of view. It's drag and drop, but the rest of it is essentially ARM templates, which is defines infrastructure, and then the rest of it is .NET code or your other supported language of choice. Now slightly onto, I've gone one slide too far. I'm sure most of you that do have existing Biztalk platforms realized that there's a fairly, I won't say aggressive, there's a time, end of support time for each of the Biztalk versions going around. I know some are in 2016 and 2013 are nearing their extended support or their mainstream support end dates. And then Biztalk 2020, while it has a mainstream to 2024 and extended to 2029, the future of Biztalk from a Microsoft point of view is a little cloudy, is my understanding. I haven't seen a great amount to say Biztalk is our tool of choice into the future, because I think the Azure cloud comes in. So there are some cool new components in Biztalk 2020, and probably some things that just needed to happen, like obviously the TLS 1.2 support and encrypted data in SQL Server. There's a nice API layer over the admin portal now. So, and one of the biggest bugbears in the admin portal of having read-only access, because I can definitely say from an administration point of view, I've been involved with people deleting the wrong thing in production and things disappearing. So because there was no such thing as read-only access. There's a much richer analytics and reporting through App Insights into Azure, so that you'll start to see that Biztalk is starting to rely on that Azure infrastructure as well. And Biztalk and the Microsoft team have introduced feature packs. If there's certain functionality you want, you can download that pack, so there isn't a huge surface upgrade if needed. That kind of ultimately for me, Biztalk is a great tool. I think it's having used it for a number of years, it's really good at solving some really good problems. Like it's the good old flat file import is a great example. It just works, and it works natively, but I don't know if the cost versus the benefits is worth it moving forward. So onto the migration options. There's kind of three main migration paths. You could upgrade to Biztalk 2020, and you could do that with your existing on-prem infrastructure, and just the change in the licensing costs. The other option would be moving your Biztalk environment to the cloud. So that'd be hosted in an IaaS manner, so an infrastructure as a service. So you'd have virtual machines and a SQL server in the cloud running your Biztalk, and it would be you'd use a site-to-site VPN or a express route to then connect back to your on-premise services and systems. That is one approach, and I guess the advantage of that IaaS is that then you are able to stand up the new environments quicker if you needed to say, hey, we need a new UAT environment for testing, or we need to stand up an extra DR resource because we need to scale up. You're not ordering tin and waiting for it to arrive and that kind of thing. Then the next option is a hybrid environment where you may want to maintain some of your on-premise integration through Biztalk. You could look at that Biztalk upgrade, or you may continue with out of support Biztalk. As one of the options. And Biztalk and the Azure services do have a nice integration between them, and that there are connectors in Biztalk to talk to the Azure cloud services. And then I think the ultimate goal for most organizations would be to move towards that full iPaaS platform. Systems now, and newer things are born of the cloud. As Pete alluded to before, a lot of off-the-shelf products that expose APIs that are in the cloud, it makes sense to connect to them from the cloud than on-premise somewhere. Obviously, there's certainly the requirements around, we want to still have our on-premise capability. That can be achieved by having that on-premise Biztalk environment. But you can also look at what Microsoft has released recently in Azure Arc. And what that is essentially a management pane that allows you to run Microsoft components like Logic Apps and API management in a Kubernetes cluster anywhere. So we have done a demo around that, in that we had a Kubernetes cluster deployed with containers that run Logic Apps and an API management instance, and it all just called through natively. The nice thing about it is that we could deploy that to AWS, Google Cloud, or an on-prem service, and it's all still managed using the same technology from the Azure portal. So, while it's multi-cloud, it's still not one look and feel, which I think is a good benefit. The way we've recommended and the way we've done things in the past is, in the migration journey for those options, is to moving towards that iPaaS platform is to take an iterative approach. I don't think everybody gets nervous about the big bang type migration. So it's about taking those, high priority services in Biztalk, and then planning and deploying the first one, and proving the iPaaS platform out and the infrastructure, and then just in an agile way, just take the next one off the rank until you can migrate all the Biztalk integrations away that you want to, or ultimately decommission those boxes and turn them off. So there is talking about migration from Biztalk to iPaaS, there is a tool out there called the Biztalk Migrator, or the Biztalk Migration Tool. And what it is, it's an open source tool that's been well contributed to, that you can essentially take your Biztalk MSI, point to this command line toolletter, and it will actually generate you Azure components, Logic Apps, Service Bus queues and topics, and other things. It's really cool. It works really well for simple integration scenarios. But if you start looking more complex integrations where you're making multiple calls inside an orchestration, it starts getting a little confusing, because it's kind of trying to replicate what Biztalk does using Azure components. And I think for, if you had a very small BizTalk landscape with fairly simple integrations, it's probably something you'd consider. But outside of that, I think you'd probably more look to say, how can we rebuild this and how can we make it better in a more modern architecture? I'll hand back to Pete here. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that pop up at the end, or shoot me an email and I can help you out there.
So look, as Chris walked through, there's a number of different options that you've got available to you to help modernise that existing integration environment or that BizTalk platform that you're running. We're seeing a number of key drivers about why people are looking to do that. One of them is around end of support and having a version to make sure that there's robust patching and governance around that, and a need to then modernise that. The other big driver that we're seeing that we spoke about was the increased agility, how we can then go and take those existing integrations and be able to increase the cadence from a deployment perspective, and also thinking about that then really only truly paying for what you use, with the ability to scale up or scale down each of those integrations based on the individual business needs. So MOQdigital has worked with a number of organisations, and we've built a proven and robust framework that enables us to be able to then look at the existing environment and assess the complexity of that. From that assessment, what it allows us to do is just understand where the risks are, because that's one of the key pieces, is making sure that whatever change that you make minimises that risk, because often those integrations are key for existing business processes, and failing and those breaking is just simply not an option there. But once that assessment is then being done, help organisations understand what the effort is and what's the best approach. Do we take the existing integrations and simply use a migration tool, or is there a better option in order to be able to pull that apart, start to introduce new frameworks in place so that you have common patterns that are used for each of those different interfaces directly with that? So one of the things that MOQdigital has done is actually then made that initial assessment available for anyone to take advantage of. And that's our BizTalk modernisation assessment. It's where one of our integration specialists then work with your team. They run some tooling across the environment and come back and present to you what some of the options are, but also giving you an understanding about the quantum of effort that's involved, not only from an effort perspective, but what that cost would look like as well. We help you go and create an Azure consumption plan to understand what the ongoing operational cost is, but also simply what is the effort to do the migration and what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of those. So if you'd like to take advantage of that modernisation assessment, feel free to reach out after the webinar, but you'll also then be sent a follow-up directly at the back of the webinar as well. But just to thank also everyone for attending the webinar today, we're also offering an Uber Eats voucher for $25 to all of the attendees that you'll also get directly after the webinar as well, to be able to then have a great lunch on MOQdigital. But if you'd like to know anything more about how you can help modernise your existing integration estate and how MOQdigital can assist with that, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll open up the floor to questions, and thank you everyone for participating in today's session. So over to you, Amelia, for any questions.
Great, thank you, Peter. We'll just wait a moment in case there are any questions. If you do have questions, just pop them in the Q&A box.
Well, folks, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out either to Chris or myself. We'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit further. Otherwise, thank you for your time today.
Awesome, thank you everyone. And as Peter mentioned, keep an eye out on your email shortly for a $25 Uber Eats voucher. We'll also be sending out a quick survey after the webinar. So if you could please fill that out for us, that would be really helpful. And further this afternoon, as Peter mentioned, you'll also receive some assets and a recording from the session. So thank you everybody for attending, and you'll find information from us soon. We did have one question, Peter, come through.
Fantastic.
So can you please expand on the auto testability of the Azure solutions?
So Chris, is that something you want to sort of talk through some of the scenarios that we've seen with customers about how they've used auto testing?
Yeah, so like I guess I'll talk from the existing Biztalk point of view and then into the iPaaS world, in that, you know, Biztalk traditionally was you know, has been hard to unit test. Like, you know, if you're a developer sitting there writing your code, you actually have to run the thing and test it out. But once you got to that, you know, CI/CD pipeline, that, you know, you want to check in code and have automated tests run, that, you know, you can assure that, you know, the code that you wrote's working, but also what's come before it is still working. I think with the move to the iPaaS type world, you can go back to more, I guess, more native .NET testing practices using XUnit or NUnit or a SpecFlow, Cucumber, if that's you want to go sort of that more user-driven story approach. So I think the capability there is to do it. It's not so much as an auto testing, but as a more of a the abilities there to do it as a much more granular and refined level, so you can have more you know, confidence in the code that is being written and deployed is going to, you know, work from the first deployment, not so much trial and error, I guess. I don't know if you want anything to add to that. Add anything to that, Peter?
No, look, I think it's actually the ability to then use all of the different modern testing patterns and frameworks, but also the ability for you to easily integrate that with your CI/CD processes, because we're seeing more and more organisations take a DevOps first approach, not only to their development patterns, but also from an integration perspective as well. But we're more than happy to spend some more time with you and whiteboard what some of those options are availability from a testing perspective, if you'd like to reach out.
Great, thank you. We also did have another question. So why do you have auto tests SpecFlow? Have you had solutions applying existing tests to new solutions?
So I think the question is have we seen the ability to migrate those existing scenarios? So Chris, do you want to maybe talk through where we've seen that?
Yeah, so I certainly have taken those same SpecFlow scenarios from a Biztalk environment and taken those, you know, those test cases across and you know, rewritten those tests inside and related to the iPaaS platform. And that's, you know, it was actually a really good proving ground to that the original integration that we built in Biztalk now, you know, actually does the same thing as it does in Azure, which is ultimately what you want when you migrate, right? So I think that's it was a really good approach to take, taking those existing test cases.
Yeah, so the ability for you to leverage your existing investments there is certainly one of the benefits that we're seeing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for answering those. That is all of our questions. So we will end the event now. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.